Before we begin, if you enjoy high-stakes sci-fi where humanity punches far above its weight, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us whose side you think the apex predator will choose. Your support helps stories like this survive in a galaxy that doesn't always root for humans. The bounty was so large that entire star systems stopped breathing when the number appeared on the galactic trade feeds. It pulsed across mercenary boards, council networks, and outlaw channels alike, translated instantly into every known currency. Capture the apex predator of Keros 9. Alive. No collateral limits. Payment guaranteed by the Galactic Council itself. For most species, the creature was not discussed as an animal. It was spoken of as a planetary malfunction, a living error that evolution should have corrected but never did. Keros 9 was classified as a death world because of it. Expeditionary forces vanished. Mining colonies went silent overnight. Sensor arrays recorded shapes moving faster than armor-plated vehicles and strikes that left nothing but molten ground and biological residue that defied analysis. No one had ever contained it. No one had ever truly fought it and won. The Council's patience had finally collapsed. Fear had followed close behind, and fear always loosened purses. Across the sector, mercenary fleets altered course. Veteran hunters dusted off kill contracts they had sworn never to take again. Younger crews, hungry and reckless, convinced themselves that enough firepower could tame anything. The prevailing assumption was simple and comforting. The apex predator was a problem of scale. Bring enough bodies, enough machines, enough credits, and even a nightmare would kneel. That assumption had already gotten people killed. On the surface of Keros 9, far from the corridors of power and the glowing promise of easy wealth, Jax Calder crouched beside a shallow ravine and watched the storm clouds roll in. He was human, which meant very little to the galaxy at large and quite a lot to the frontier worlds that still remembered who had survived when help never came. His armor was worn but meticulously maintained, patched in places with alloys no longer manufactured. A long rifle rested across his knees, powered down, its barrel angled toward the ground in a posture that suggested caution rather than readiness to kill. Jax had been a scout once, back when the Council still pretended humans were expendable but useful. He had learned how to read alien terrain the way other species read data streams. The wind told him where predators moved. The silence told him where they waited. Keros 9 spoke constantly and only fools ignored it. Something massive shifted in the shadows behind him, displacing air with the subtle violence of a collapsing mountain. The ground trembled, not from weight alone, but from controlled power held in check. Jax did not turn. He did not raise his weapon. He simply reached into a pouch at his side and set a strip of dried protein on a flat stone. The apex predator emerged far enough for its outline to be visible. Its form defied clean categorization, a blend of muscle, plated hide, and limbs that suggested speed over brute force, though it possessed both in excess. Its eyes, multifaceted and disturbingly alert, fixed on Jax's unprotected back. Any other creature on the planet would have frozen or fled. Jax stayed still. After a moment that stretched longer than comfort allowed, the predator lowered its head and took the offering. Not greedily. Not submissively. It accepted the food the way an equal accepts a gesture, then settled beside him, its massive presence turning the ravine into shared territory. This was the truth the bounty boards did not know. Jax had not captured the apex predator. He had not tamed it. There were no control implants buried beneath its hide, no sonic leashes, no neural overrides. Months ago, when a territorial conflict between lesser megafauna had driven the creature toward his survey zone, Jax had made a choice that no algorithm would have recommended. He had stood his ground, bleeding and outgunned, and redirected the threat away from both of them. Survival, on Keros 9, was a language spoken fluently only by those willing to listen. Since then, the predator had followed him, not as a pet or a weapon, but as something far more dangerous to the galaxy's sense of order, a partner. Jax's wrist unit vibrated softly, a priority signal punching through the planet's interference. He glanced at the data and felt his jaw tighten. Long-range sensors had finally lit up. Multiple warp signatures. Heavy tonnage. Mercenary-class vessels in numbers that suggested cooperation rather than competition, at least for now. They were coming for the bounty. Off-world analysts would later argue about probabilities and threat assessments, about how no single human mercenary could matter against fleets equipped with capture grids and orbital suppression weapons. They would fail to account for one critical variable, the same one they always missed when humans were involved. Jax looked at the creature beside him, at the way its gaze tracked the sky with intelligence sharpened by countless hunts. "They think you're for sale," he said quietly, more statement than question. The apex predator's tail lashed once against the stone, a sound like distant thunder rolling across the ravine. Above them, the clouds thickened, and the first mercenary ships broke atmosphere, confident, well-funded, and utterly convinced that loyalty was just another resource to be purchased. Jax had survived Karos 9 long enough to understand that the planet did not yield its secrets willingly. Every canyon, every wind-twisted ridge, every shallow pool of corrosive water demanded respect or claimed flesh. He moved like a shadow among shadows, silent boots on rock, eyes scanning for movement that betrayed more than just predators. The apex predator was never far. Its presence was a steadying weight at his back, a living compass attuned to dangers no human senses could detect. Together they had become an unspoken team, two predators reading the same landscape from different vantage points. Months before the Council's bounty went public, Jax had encountered the creature under circumstances that would have killed anyone else. A territorial clash between two alpha predators had erupted near a mineral-rich plateau where Jax had been charting safe landing corridors. Blaster rounds pinged off rocks, and the air shimmered with energy discharge. The predator had appeared, colossal and fluid, teeth bared and claws digging into stone. It was meant to kill him. Jax had known that instinctively, and yet he had made a choice that defied logic and risk assessment. He had stepped forward, exposed, holding nothing but a portable energy flare. Time had dilated in that instant, measured not by seconds but by decisions. Jax had assessed the predator's behavior, noting the subtle signals that suggested awareness rather than pure instinct. He had moved with deliberate calm, shifting his weight, maintaining eye contact without aggression. Then, in a gesture that would later seem like madness, he had injured himself just enough to prove he could be vulnerable without inviting immediate death. The creature had paused, curious. It had not attacked. And when he directed it away from both him and the warring alpha, it had obeyed, not as a servant, but as an equal acknowledging a shared understanding. Since that day the apex predator had shadowed him across the hostile terrain, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden among the rocks and mist. Jax knew its patterns, how it reacted to weather, to terrain, to faint vibrations in the soil that no human device could read. It moved with a lethal grace, anticipating dangers before they materialized. He had learned that it could kill an armored war machine in a single strike, yet it would never strike without reason when he was present. That trust was not bought. It was earned. Jax crouched on the ridge overlooking a narrow gorge, scanning the incoming mercenary fleet through a portable scope. He adjusted for atmospheric interference, counting signatures, measuring energy emissions and noting formation patterns. Each vessel was marked for heavy ordnance, designed to subdue planetary wildlife, but the human mind behind these machines had not considered the predator's cognition. Machines did not comprehend loyalty, subtle strategy, or improvisation under stress. Humans did, and so did the creature at his side. A low rumble vibrated through the rock beneath his boots, a prelude to movement. The apex predator emerged from concealment, massive shoulders rising and falling, eyes fixed on the distant ships. Jax didn't need to speak. A subtle hand signal, almost imperceptible, shifted their formation. The predator responded immediately, padding silently down the slope to a vantage point where it could intercept threats. Jax followed, rifle raised but held loosely. Every step, every motion had been rehearsed in scenarios too numerous to count. Memories of past mercenary encounters flickered through his mind. He had seen well-trained alien units underestimate human resilience, dismissing instinct as primitive. Yet it had been instinct that had saved him countless times, the intuition honed by decades of living where miscalculation meant death. Humans had a way of seeing solutions that others could not, of bending situations to their advantage when brute force failed. He adjusted his scope, marking a sequence of anticipated approach vectors. The predator would cover the high ground, he would manage the choke point. Together they were a force that calculations could not predict. Jax's wrist communicator vibrated, transmitting a scrambled message from a nearby mercenary scout team. He read it without acknowledgement, noting their confidence. They believed they were the hunters. They assumed the human alone would be easy prey. They did not know that the apex predator had already recognized them as threats, cataloged their speed, their firepower, their likely reaction times. It would exploit weaknesses that the mercenaries would never anticipate. A gust of wind carried the first hint of chemical exhaust from the descending ships. The predator shifted, muscles coiling like compressed springs. Jax adjusted his stance, feeling the rhythm of its anticipation, the subtle changes in the air around them. It was more than a bond, it was a dialogue conducted without words, an understanding that exceeded species, a mutual acknowledgement that survival was no longer solitary. Jax considered the consequences of the bounty. Entire fleets, lavishly funded and eager for glory, were approaching under the assumption that victory was guaranteed. They had never met a human like him, one who refused to flee, one who commanded a creature the galaxy had declared untouchable. They had never accounted for intelligence paired with instinct, for patience married to lethality. The first light from the ship's energy pulses hit the ridge, casting long shadows. The apex predator tensed, ears flicking toward multiple sources, tail lashing once in measured anticipation. Jax exhaled slowly, letting the air carry his presence outward, unthreatening yet firm. He did not flinch. He had made the choice long ago that he would not be prey. He had already earned the allegiance of the one being capable of enforcing that choice. As the fleet descended, confident in their bounty and blind to the partnership before them, Jax felt a grim satisfaction. He would not wait for them to understand. He would demonstrate it. The predator's low growl vibrated through the stone beneath him, a sound both warning and promise. Jax's hand brushed the creature's flank, a silent communication. They would meet the mercenaries together. The galaxy might calculate odds, might assign probabilities, but it had not accounted for loyalty, for strategy, for a human who refused to be measured by conventional metrics. And with that shared understanding, they moved down into the gorge, shadows among shadows, ready to confront a fleet that had spent fortunes to capture a creature that already belonged to him. The first encounter was inevitable, and it would not end as the hunters anticipated. The first pulse of energy from the descending ships painted the jagged cliffs with cold, artificial light. Jax pressed himself against the rocky overhang, his pulse synchronized with the subtle vibrations radiating from the apex predator at his side. The creature's gaze swept across the fleet, analyzing shapes, movement patterns, and the faintest tremors in the air that human eyes would never perceive. Every sensor and scanner the mercenaries relied on was irrelevant here. Instinct and intelligence, combined, were far deadlier than any weapon array. The ships landed with measured precision, releasing armored teams that fanned out like hunting insects. Jax's hands tightened on his rifle. He didn't panic. Fear was a tool, one he wielded with careful discipline. The predator crouched beside him, a living engine of muscle and anticipation, tail flicking against stone with rhythm that suggested both power and patience. They had faced threats before, but never so organized, so confident in their presumed advantage. A mercenary unit advanced first, scanning the terrain with thermal optics and hovering drones. Their leader, a tall, multi-limbed alien with a voice distorted through a synthesizer, barked orders that echoed across the ravine. Sweep the area. Human alive or dead, secure the target. No mistakes. They assumed control, assumed dominance, and most importantly, assumed the predator was untouchable only because it had no human handler. They were wrong. Jax's plan was simple in principle. Exploit every expectation and assumption the mercenaries had, use terrain and timing to create chaos, and let the predator neutralize the immediate threats. He adjusted his position, aligning sight lines, calculating angles. The predator mirrored his actions, muscles coiling, claws flexing against the stone, eyes narrowing into pinpoints of focus. The first contact was subtle. A drone hovered too close to the cliff edge, oblivious to the predator's presence. In a blur of motion, the creature lunged, silent, precise, dismantling the device with a single strike that scattered its components across the rock. The mercenary team barely had time to register a malfunction before the predator's roar split the air, a warning that no algorithm could predict. Panic flickered across their visors. The human was no longer alone. He had a partner capable of orchestrating devastation. Jax fired once, a controlled shot that disabled a targeting array on a hovering drone. He moved without hesitation, signaling to the predator with a subtle nod. Together they became an unseen force, a combination of calculated human tactics and primal, overwhelming power. Every mercenary step was met with counteraction. Every advantage they assumed was neutralized by the creature's anticipation. Communication within the mercenary ranks deteriorated. Their leader's synthetic voice rose in anger and confusion, issuing contradictory orders as teams collided, misstepped, and fell prey to traps they could not perceive. The predator had anticipated their formations, adjusted in real time, and exploited weaknesses faster than the human commanders could recalibrate. Jax did not gloat. He did not need to. Observation and action were one and the same, and the predator's movements amplified his every decision. A second unit approached from the canyon's opposite side, believing themselves clever, thinking they could flank the human and force the creature into retreat. The predator anticipated them, leaping from shadow to shadow, intercepting with surgical strikes that dismantled armor and weapons without unnecessary bloodshed. The humans behind the controls had assumed the apex predator's loyalty could be coerced or calculated, yet every move it made was proof that allegiance could not be bought, only earned. Jax ducked behind a jagged outcrop, keeping pace with the predator's maneuvers, updating his plan with each shift in the battlefield. He noted energy readings, movement vectors, and the cadence of approaching forces. Each mercenary mistake became an opportunity, each miscalculation a pathway to control. In minutes, the organized assault had dissolved into scattered, panicked attempts at survival. One of the alien squads had paused, realizing that the human and the predator operated as one entity. A voice crackled over the comms, tinged with disbelief. It's protecting him. Recognition spread across the remaining units. Some faltered, unsure whether retreat or attack was wiser. Those who attacked first were quickly neutralized. The predator's intellect combined with Jax's precision created a synergy that could not be measured by firepower alone. Jax took a moment to survey the battlefield from his vantage, noting the wreckage and the few survivors regrouping under heavy cover. He understood what they had assumed, that a single human was expendable, that creatures, no matter how dangerous, could be reduced to assets. He also understood the lesson they were about to learn, that loyalty, skill, and instinct were weapons no credits could purchase. The predator approached, moving fluidly, and lowered its massive head close to Jax. The subtle motion was a silent confirmation. They were ready for the next wave. Jax adjusted his rifle, scanning the remaining mercenary positions, and considered how little they understood about the creature they had tried to capture. It would not be controlled. It would not be caged. It had already chosen. From the cliff above, additional dropships began their descent, unaware that their predecessors had already failed. Jax allowed himself a measured smile, a human expression that conveyed confidence without arrogance. He had no illusions about the fight ahead. It would demand every skill, every ounce of patience, and every ounce of instinct. But for now, he knew that the predator's allegiance was absolute, and that knowledge was worth more than any fleet of mercenaries or any fortune promised by the council. As the sound of engines grew louder, the predator's low growl resonated against the rocks, vibrating through the canyon like a living drumbeat. Jax's mind was already moving through contingencies, angles, and possibilities. The mercenaries assumed they could overwhelm him with numbers and technology. They had not accounted for trust, strategy, or the bond between a human and a creature that saw the galaxy in a way no machine could interpret. He shifted his stance, readying for the inevitable encounter. The predator mirrored his readiness, muscles coiled and eyes fixed on the horizon where the next ships would land. The first engagement had been a lesson, a demonstration of power tempered with intelligence. The next phase would be decisive. And as the shadowed canyon waited, Jax and the apex predator moved as one, a combination of human ingenuity and raw, natural authority that no mercenary fleet could anticipate, let alone defeat. The galaxy had underestimated humans before, and it would do so again, at its own peril. The Council's envoy arrived in orbit above Keros 9 under a banner of authority, their ships gleaming with the promise of negotiation and coercion. Jax watched from a ridge, the apex predator crouched beside him like a living sentinel. The human and the beast shared a silent acknowledgement. Words would not sway loyalty forged in survival, in understanding, in respect earned rather than demanded. The envoy's transmission crackled across his wrist communicator, formal, polished, insistent. Jax Calder, the Council offers you wealth, status, and immunity. Release the creature and all rewards are yours. Refusal is inadvisable. Jax exhaled slowly, letting the controlled rhythm of his breath mask the sharp calculation behind his eyes. He glanced at the predator, noting the subtle shift in posture, the tightening of muscles, the awareness that extended beyond the limits of technology. It's not yours to command, he said quietly, more statement than negotiation. It never was. You can't buy loyalty. The envoy's reply was a mixture of incredulity and veiled threat. It is a living asset, Jax. The Council cannot allow a single human to control a creature of this magnitude. Compliance is mandatory. Jax allowed a short laugh, dry and unamused. Compliance had never been part of his vocabulary, not on Keros 9 and not anywhere else in the galaxy. From below, the remaining mercenary squads hesitated. They had assumed victory was inevitable. They had believed that the apex predator, no matter how intelligent, could be neutralized, caged, or coerced into obedience. Now the reality struck with brutal clarity. The creature moved with purpose, not chaos. It was lethal, precise, and utterly aligned with the human beside it. Jax adjusted his grip on the rifle, aware of each energy pulse, each shadow, each shift in the terrain that could offer advantage. The predator mirrored him, a living instrument of calculated power. Together, they were a force that no amount of wealth or technological superiority could dictate. The mercenary fleets had brought machinery. They had brought firepower. But they had not brought trust, foresight, or the kind of intuition that came from understanding the predator as a partner rather than a weapon. The first wave descended into the canyon below, confident, well-armed, and dangerously ignorant. The predator intercepted without hesitation, strikes delivered with precision that shredded armor and weaponry alike. Jax moved in tandem, exploiting every gap, every moment of hesitation in the mercenaries' ranks. The battlefield became a demonstration not of brute strength, but of intelligence applied under pressure, of instinct synchronized with strategy. The council envoy attempted to intercede through communications, issuing ultimatums that dissolved into static as the mercenary squads faltered under the apex predator's efficiency. Jax observed each reaction, predicting outcomes and adjusting his approach. The envoy did not understand that loyalty cannot be quantified, cannot be bargained for, and cannot be coerced. The creature's allegiance was absolute, and it had already decided who it would fight for. In moments, the remaining mercenary teams were fragmented, disoriented, and exposed. The predator's low growl reverberated through the canyon, a sound that communicated both threat and protection. Jax moved through the chaos, targeting only what was necessary to maintain control of the battlefield. He did not kill recklessly. He did not need to. Every action was calculated to assert dominance while minimizing unnecessary destruction. The envoy's tone grew increasingly desperate. "This is a negotiation, Jax. You are risking annihilation." Jax's reply was measured, unwavering. "You miscalculate. Survival is not a negotiation. Loyalty is not a commodity. You have already lost what you never understood." His words carried across encrypted channels and empty canyons, more declaration than explanation. A final strike group descended, hoping to overwhelm what they assumed was a human flanked by a predator of limited comprehension. They were met with a coordinated counter, the predator moving as extension of Jax's intent, intelligence anticipating movement and nullifying advantage before it could manifest. Mercenaries fell back, confusion spreading as they realized the battle was no longer theirs to control. Jax scanned the battlefield, noting the survivors retreating, the remaining forces regrouping in disarray. He allowed himself a measured nod to the predator, acknowledging their effectiveness without pride, recognizing instead the understanding that had brought them to this point. The creature responded with a subtle motion, ears flicking, tail sweeping low, eyes tracking distant threats even as they paused. The council envoy's fleet hovered above, powerless to enforce compliance. The human and the apex predator had demonstrated an immutable truth. Authority imposed from afar was meaningless without the recognition of those who truly commanded loyalty. Wealth, status, and promises could not sway the partnership forged in experience, in mutual respect, and in shared survival. Jax lowered his weapon slightly, keeping his stance relaxed but ready. The predator remained alert, every muscle coiled, every sense attuned. The message was clear. No force, no amount of credits or decrees, could overturn the bond between human and apex predator. The galaxy had underestimated humans once again, and the cost of that miscalculation would echo across sectors. As silence settled over the ravine, broken only by the occasional retreating pulse of energy from departing mercenary ships, Jax allowed a rare moment of reflection. The battlefield was quiet now, controlled not by technology or numbers, but by understanding, patience, and the unwavering choice to stand firm. The predator rested beside him, a reminder that survival was not always about dominance, but about alliance. And in that quiet, the next phase of inevitability began to take shape. The council might continue to issue ultimatums, fleets might attempt further engagement, but one fact remained immutable. The apex predator had chosen. Jax Calder had earned loyalty that no wealth, no threat, no machinery could ever claim. The galaxy had been reminded once more that humans could defy expectation, bend circumstance, and redefine what it meant to wield power. With the threat diminished, yet not entirely gone, Jax and the apex predator prepared for whatever challenge would emerge next. Their bond, tested and proven, had shifted the balance in a galaxy that frequently misjudged human capability. The lesson was clear, immediate, and uncompromising. Loyalty cannot be purchased. Authority cannot be imposed. And underestimating humans comes at a price far higher than any bounty. The predator's low growl carried across the rocks, a living signal that whatever came next, they would face it together. Jax's hand brushed its flank in acknowledgement. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in the escalation of threats, he was certain of one truth: they were not just surviving. They were in control. The galaxy had learned, and the apex predator had already spoken through action, not words. And as the canyon settled into tense quiet, Jax understood the final principle of the encounter. The council, the mercenaries, the fleets, they had all misread the equation. Humans, when allied with something the galaxy feared and respected, could not be calculated. They could only be endured, and those who tried to bend them invariably failed. The sector watched in stunned silence as the last of the mercenary ships retreated, leaving Karos 9's canyons echoing with the remnants of conflict. Reports reached the council in fragmented bursts. Entire fleets neutralized, squads decimated, and the apex predator nowhere near containment. Analysts struggled to reconcile what had occurred with probability models, unaware that probability had never applied when humans and their instincts were involved. Jax Calder, crouched atop a ridge with the predator at his side, surveyed the aftermath not with triumph, but with measured clarity. The battle had ended, but the war of perception had only begun. The apex predator exhaled, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the stone beneath them. Its eyes, multifaceted and alert, scanned the horizon, catching every glint of movement, every subtle shift in shadow. Jax reached down, brushing a hand across its armored flank. The gesture was simple, but it conveyed trust, mutual understanding, and an unspoken agreement. They would continue to face the galaxy together, on terms of their own choosing. For the first time since the Council's bounty had been announced, Jax allowed himself to reflect on the nature of loyalty. The predator had not been tamed, coerced, or tricked. It had chosen him, a decision that had rewritten the assumptions of every mercenary fleet and strategist who had dared to underestimate a human. That bond was more powerful than the Council's fleets, more enduring than credits or influence. It was a living testament to the fact that survival, when guided by respect and intelligence, could surpass force and expectation. In the distance, scouts from the remaining mercenary factions attempted to regroup, hoping to salvage honor or extract revenge. The predator's low growl warned them from afar, a sound carrying authority no language could match. Jax did not intervene immediately. He allowed the predators of war and money to feel the weight of miscalculation. Patience had always been a weapon humans wielded well, and now, with the apex predator at his side, it became lethal. The Council's envoy broadcast one last attempt at negotiation, their tone laced with desperation. Jax Calder, withdraw or face complete eradication. Compliance will be rewarded, resistance will be punished. Jax responded with a clarity born of certainty. You already know the outcome. Stop wasting resources. The creature does not belong to you, and I do not answer to your threats. If you persist, you will learn why humans survive where others fail. From the shadows, the predator shifted, its massive form moving with coiled precision. Jax's senses were attuned to every motion. They were no longer simply defending themselves, they were asserting dominance, rewriting the rules the galaxy had assumed were immutable. When the next squad attempted a surprise descent, they encountered the predator first. Its strike was instantaneous, overwhelming, and final. The humans of the galaxy had long been dismissed as fragile, but here, in the wilds of Karos 9, one human had redefined that fragility as cunning, patience, and deadly synergy with a force no one could challenge. Jax moved forward, rifle in hand, eyes sharp and calculating. He observed the retreating mercenaries, noting fear etched into their every motion, hesitation crippling their coordination. This was not slaughter for pleasure. It was precision, control, and a demonstration of consequences for those who misread their prey. Each step he took was mirrored by the predator, the two of them a singular entity of awareness and lethal intent. Above them, the Council's remaining ships hovered, unable to act without risking annihilation. For the first time, their calculations faltered, as if the universe itself had shifted under the weight of human defiance. Jax understood their dilemma and let the predator's presence speak for him. No words could carry the authority of the predator's judgment, and no threat could pierce the armor of earned loyalty. Finally, with the battlefield secured, Jax allowed himself a measured breath. The apex predator rested beside him, muscles coiled but relaxed, eyes fixed on the horizon where new challenges might emerge. The human and the beast had survived not through brute strength alone, but through understanding, trust, and the subtle mastery of instinct and intelligence. They had demonstrated that true power was not measured in ships, fleets, or credits, but in the ability to act decisively, to anticipate, and to command loyalty that no threat could undermine. As dusk settled over the jagged cliffs of Keros 9, Jax reflected on the lesson imparted to the galaxy. Humans were underestimated at their own peril. Their alliances, their intuition, their capacity for patience and strategy could not be quantified or bought. And when such a human stood beside a predator of unimaginable strength, the result was not chaos, it was control. The predator nudged him gently, a reminder that their partnership was more than survival, it was a shared command of circumstance. Jax's hand pressed against its armored hide, and he allowed himself a small, rare smile. The bounty was no longer a threat. It was a story that would echo across systems, a cautionary tale for those who misjudged humans and the creatures who recognized them as equals. From the ridges above, the last of the retreating mercenary ships disappeared into space, their confidence shattered, their strategy undone. Jax and the apex predator stood alone amidst the jagged rocks and fading light, a pair that the galaxy had failed to calculate and could not contain. Their bond had survived every expectation, every threat, and every attempt to undermine it. And in that quiet, thrilling stillness, Jax knew the final truth of Keros 9. The apex predator had chosen its side, and that side was human. Loyalty once earned was absolute. Power once understood was undeniable. And when the galaxy inevitably returned with new threats, Jax and the creature would be ready, not because they were invincible but because they were united in a way no calculation could ever replicate. The horizon darkened, stars flickering to life across the alien sky, and Jax's silhouette merged with the predator's massive form. Together they were a force of nature and intellect intertwined, an unshakable testament to the resilience of humans and the alliances they forged. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The apex predator had spoken. And the future, uncertain as it was, belonged to them.